Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Escape from San Francisco podcast. Um, I'm lucky to have someone that has really great 49er insight. You can follow him on Twitter at Vish Kumaran. You can see him with Grant Cohen on Mondays. He's someone that I've been, following steady over the course of the season, and someone I got introduced by Grant Cohen, and just seeing the way he talks about the 49ers from a strategic standpoint, but just common sense on the X's and O's of, of the game. It's pretty much made me become a better fan. And without further ado, I'd like to let everyone know who Vish is. Nice to meet you, man.
Hey, what's up, man? Thank you so much for having me on, Aaron. It's a real nice, it's really nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to join you on this podcast.
So, how long have you been a 49er fan?
Been a 49ers fan since I was 5 years old. I'm 21 now, so it's been 16 long years.
Oh, so you've been grinding through the bad years, just like me in the early 2000s
I've
or mid 2000s when it was just horrible, horrible football, but I still loved it. I don't know why.
I've I've only actually really been in the bad years. There's not been much else. I used to complain when I was 8, 9 to my dad because he's the reason I became a Niners fan. Used to complain to him like, "How could you make me a Niners fan? Why am I so passionate about a team that sucks? Why couldn't you have like made me a Patriots fan?" He would be like, "Okay, go be a Patriots fan," but like I couldn't let it go. I had that kind of like obsession with the Niners and just wanted to cheer for them because I grew that attached that quickly.
Yeah, same for me. My stepdad, he was the one that fan. I just remember watching them, and when they had like Tim Rattay and they had Kevin Barlow as the running back, just we would go like 4 and something, 5 and something. We drafted Alex Smith, and he threw his first touchdown pass at the last game of the season to Brandon Lloyd. Like, just it was just wild. And I remember watching every single game and realizing like at the end of the season, I'm like, man, what am I doing? But I'll still do it again. I just love the game of football, but more importantly, I just love watching the 49ers. It just something, it's like a family thing, and it just brings like joy and something to do on Sundays. I don't really like fantasy football that much because I feel like I like to focus on the 49ers primarily. Watching other teams and stuff, it's good and all, but it's nothing better than rooting for the team that you grew up loving. For you, I want to talk about what the 49ers need to address this offseason. I understand they're going into this with a lot of free agents that are pending. They also have a quarterback controversy right now, whether they're going to pick up the option for Jimmy Garoppolo. There's so much things going on. What direction do you want them to go?
I mean, in what sense? There's so many different directions they can go. I mean, it just depends. Like, what are you asking from a quarterback standpoint, or where would you? What direction are you asking in regards to?
Where do you want them to go quarterback wise first? And then we could go on to what do you want them to do with the free agencies they have pending? And after that, we could talk about what do you want them to do in the draft?
So, um, from a quarterback standpoint, I'm really into that idea of them getting Matthew Stafford, the quarterback for the Detroit Lions. I'm a really big fan. I think a lot of people look at his wins and loss record and often say, well, what has he done in Detroit after being picked first overall? My question to you or anybody who has that line of thinking is, what has anybody done in Detroit? The Detroit Lions are the one of the worst organizations in the NFL. They just don't win. They don't support their players. That's why Barry Sanders retired early. That's why Calvin Johnson retired early. Matthew Stafford is one of the greater quarterback talents of my lifetime. There's very few quarterbacks that have his arm talent, his control, his accuracy, his mobility, his smarts. He brings every single trait that you want to the table. He just hasn't been supported by the Lions. And I think if you give him to Kyle Shanahan, a guy that's going to give him a run game, is going to have him play complementary football, give him a lot of easy throws where he doesn't have to throw 20-yard bombs, 30-yard bombs every single play for them to win, you'd be surprised how successful he is because the talent is just spectacular.
I do like that, and I do support getting Matthew Stafford. But the only thing I caution about is the cost to get him, the age that he's at right now, and the contract that he currently has. Um,
Okay.
I know that's probably not the biggest deal, but it's just like what costs? What can the
Okay, so
49ers?
his contract in terms of cap hit, would be cheaper than Jimmy Garoppolo next year for the 49ers. And he's a significantly better football player than Jimmy Garoppolo. Number two, in regards to the cost of getting him, yeah, it's going to be first round pick, second round pick. It's going to be heavy assets. But the 49ers aren't going to get a superior quarterback talent at number 12 in this draft. Just assuming Fields, Lawrence, and Wilson are going to go in the top five, it's going to cost more to trade up for both of them than it is going to be to trade for Matthew Stafford. And number three, from a physical talent standpoint, outside of Lawrence, I don't even think Fields or Wilson compared to Matthew Stafford at 33, even from just a physical talent standpoint. Guys with Matthew Stafford's talent don't come in the draft every other year. I mean, I'm going to start throwing names out of how talented he is. He's at the Rodgers, Mahomes, Josh Allen level of physical talent and his ability to throw the ball. He's really that special. And I think coaching has hurt him, organizational structure has hurt him, lack of significant supporting cast talent has hurt him. Like outside of having Calvin Johnson, what has he really had in Detroit? And I think that that's why people have a negative outlook on his career thus far when it's been extremely successful given what he's been given. And I think you give him to Kyle, and I think one, the Niners are immediate Super Bowl contenders, and two, I think he would win a couple MVPs with Kyle Shanahan.
You know that he's pretty much under the radar, being stashed away in Detroit. A lot of people don't really, follow what comes out of the horrible organization for many, many years. That being said, I do think Matthew Stafford is a really great quarterback, and even Aaron Rodgers says, always talks highly of Matthew Stafford all the time. The throws that he makes. I remember one of the games where he got injured, like he injured his shoulder, and he still went in and win the game. It was just like that grittiness that you don't see out of Garoppolo that you want in a quarterback, is to go in there even when they're not 100%, they're not even 75%, but they go and they grind it out and they make it happen. I'm not saying that Garoppolo has to play injured and play at a super high level, but just seeing his willingness to go in there and fight for it, you just don't get it from him. But that might not just be his personality, though. And I think as a casual fan, you want that out of the person that leads your team, right? The person that you want to have success going forward.
Yeah, so here's what I will say. I don't like commenting because you don't know what goes around on people's bodies. You don't know how much they're hurting. You don't know how capable they are of playing. But I think it's really admirable that Matthew Stafford does play through injury. I'll leave it at that.
That's true. That being said, so if it does cost them a lot of that draft capital, then you have to depend on free agents. 49ers have a high list of free agents that they're going to need to sign or figure out, going forward with the roster. A couple of the key ones that I want them to sign is Jason Verrett. I don't really know about the fullback, if they should re-sign him or not. I understand that he's become a big part of their offense, especially this year. I know he does a lot for them. Other than that, free agents do you want them to re-sign?
So for me, the top two are Trent Williams, Jason Verrett. To me, everybody else is kind of just, it's those two guys and then worry about everything else. I think the three priorities of the Niners offseason when you look at contract structure and re-signing people is the first two is you have to re-sign Trent Williams, you have to re-sign Jason Verrett, and you have to somehow find a way to extend Fred Warner. Those are the three big cap decisions they have to make first. Everybody else falls into a category of, yeah, it would be nice to bring them back, but they're not the biggest priority. My thing with the fullback Kyle Juszczyk is I think that his value to the 49ers is actually somewhat overrated, just in the sense that he was one of the first players they signed. They gave him a large contract. He does a lot of media, so he's well known. He's always talked about by the national media and the commentary because he's one of the few 49ers players with a national notoriety. So when people talk about the Niners offense, they talk about his impact. But he actually doesn't play that many snaps in a game. He only plays 42% of their snaps. Their offense, he gets removed from their offense when they get into obvious pass situations. He does a great job of marrying the run and the pass, and he's a phenomenal football player. He's not overrated in that sense. But I do think that his versatility, while excellent, people can approximate all the different roles he plays within this offense because the Niners have enough versatile and talented players now. When he was signed at the time, he was essential because he was the only one who could play all those different roles. Now you got a Charlie Warner who can fill in as a lead blocker. You got a Ross Dwelly who can fill in when he plays tight end and have some snaps at fullback. George Kittle can do the same type of stuff. Jalen Hurd, if he's healthy and he comes back, he can line up at fullback. He can line up at tight end. He can line up at wide receiver. He can do it all. And he's a better ball carrier than Juszczyk. So when I look at it from that sense, none of those players are as good as Kyle Juszczyk. Absolutely not. But if you're saying, can they replace Trent Williams with Justin School? No. Are you saying they can replace Jason Verrett with Emmanuel Mosley? Absolutely not. I would even put Jaquaski Tart and ahead of him and K'Wan Williams because with both of them, health is the concern. But Tarvarius Moore can't do what Jaquaski Tart can do. That's a big no. And K'Wan Williams' value to the 49ers is huge. I mean, I don't think he's that valuable to other teams, but the way he attacks the ball, the way he tackles, the way he blitzes, how good he is in zone coverage and all of that is extremely valuable to the 49ers. And I think that those four guys are harder for them to replace given their roster construction rather than Juszczyk. I mean, Kyle Shanahan has had a successful offense, whether he has a marquee fullback when he had Vonta Leach in Houston, or he doesn't when he didn't really have a fullback or a fullback with great notoriety in Atlanta. So he's going to make it work with what they have. And in that sense, I think that the other thing is I think Juszczyk's going to price himself out. I think one of these Kyle Shanahan disciple type guys are going to offer him a huge contract just so that they can mimic more of the things Kyle does with his offense. And Juszczyk can do all those things. And he's obviously a great guy from a cultural standpoint. So I just don't. I see him actually just should be the Niners' least priority, and I think that he's just a guy that they have no hope of signing.
And honestly, I agree with you with that. When I do watch the games, I don't really get that excited when they use him as a pass catcher out of the backfield. I do like his run blocking, but that's something that you could replace. That's something that you can find value at, way less. Either undrafted free agents or someone that's already on the roster that they
Their
could put in.
best, sorry to interrupt, but
No,
their
go ahead.
best run blocking, run game last year versus Carolina was without Kyle Juszczyk on the field. So they've shown that they're more than capable of running the football with George Kittle as a lead blocker and a bunch of different guys doing
Mhm.
different things. And Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan are super duper creative. So
Yeah, you hit on all those aspects. That's why I feel like, I mean, it might not be in the 49ers' best interest, especially with the cap going down, to sign him. Um, if they can't get Trent Williams, it will be a disaster.
right,
He's one of the best tackles, and he fits their system. I mean, he does have his flaws, but if they don't sign him, who can replace? Where
no
are they
one.
going to find a left tackle? Mike McGlinchey is not going to go to left tackle. He's struggling on his side. Imagine him going to the left. There's no way. Like, if that if we can't sign Trent Williams, I don't see them even going to the playoffs. That's how they need to solidify that offensive line before we can even get to the quarterback. If you could get a good quarterback, but if the offensive line doesn't hold up, or if they can't run their offense the way Kyle wants to run it, it's going to be a long season again.
Right, right. And I think the thing with Juszczyk is that I think the reason it's an unpopular opinion is because fans have grown attached to him. He does a lot more media and he's a lot more connected and he's a lot more talked about than a Tart or a K'Wan Williams, who really aren't talked about for how good they are, even though they're both phenomenal. And so that's why I think he has a fan attachment to him because fans look at him, they admire him, and he's been marketed and represented that way. But I think when you really get into it and you start looking at what a player's impact is, it's not that he isn't a great player because he's as good a football player as there is on this team. He's really, really good. It's just that what he does for this team can be replaced. While I would argue that those two guys are of somewhat equal value to him and maybe have worse backup players where you kind of need to sign them.
And not only with Trent Williams, you're right on Jason Verrett. They need to sign him because he solidifies the cornerback position so much. You can't just replace those type of talents. You can't just plug in someone and it's going to be fine. You can for other positions on the field, but for left tackle and cornerback and even safety, We saw when Tart was not in there how the defense has changed. The way Traverse Moore his routes sometimes were just horrible. Like I don't know how he would just be in the wrong place and one cut and the running back is right by him, or you look and there's a pass that's just over his head and open receiver, whatever it might be. So they need to solidify that. And going from that, now you're heading into the draft. What are the biggest, concerns you have about the draft? And who do you want the 49ers to target?
Yeah, I mean, in the case that they address the quarterback position with a veteran quarterback like I prefer, obviously my pick of the veteran quarterbacks would be Matthew Stafford. But let's say they address the quarterback position. I think the draft, you got to go premium positions. To me, there's four premium positions in football worth investing a first round type pick in. You start with left tackle, or either tackle in this case,
Mm-hmm.
either edge rusher, cornerback, and quarterback. I value them probably quarterback, edge rusher, tackle, corner, but it's that those four positions. And I think the 49ers got to go edge rusher, they got to go cornerback. And the reason I say edge rusher is, yeah, I know Kerry Hyder has had a kind of a breakout season, but the expectation with Kerry Hyder to replicate this exact season next year, it's it's a steep ask. Javon Kinlaw is going to get better. Nick Bosa coming back is going to help, but the 49ers can't afford to put all that pressure on Nick Bosa because he is coming off a very serious injury, and they need Nick Bosa to be a 10-year player for them. They need that type from Nick Bosa. So they need to be careful with his body. D Ford, it looks like his back is hopeless. It looks like he really is hurt, and maybe retirement is a question for D Ford again. And they need to find a way to replace him. D Ford is one of the best players on this team when he's healthy. If we're ranking the 10 best 49ers when healthy, we say regardless of health, everybody's going to say D Ford because he's that good. Well, you got to find a
No
way to
doubt.
replace that explosion and have someone compliment Nick Bosa because it'll help Javon Kinlaw. It'll help Nick Bosa, and it'll take pressure off of those two guys. So I would say edge rusher that way. And then cornerback, it's a position that they haven't heavily invested in with their time with Kyle and John Lynch with their time with the 49ers. Jason Verrett has kind of saved them this year by being able to come back and play at the level he was playing at. I think maybe if they can find a way to bring back a Kello Witherspoon, that would be awesome because he's been playing really good football the last two. He played really good football the last 2-3 weeks of the season, but you can't rely on that and just give him a starter job. Mosley's a pretty good player. You need some sort of guy that you can come in and say compete and be a starter from day one. And the reason I would say edge rusher and cornerback at the top of the draft, whether it's a second round pick, whether it's a first round pick, is the top edge rushers are usually top 15 picks. The top cornerbacks are usually top 15 picks because it's just how that works because you need superior athletes in both those positions. So that's where I personally am looking at it right now. I don't think interior line or center. I think center is something they can address with a veteran center like Alex Mack in free agency. And I just don't look at those as positions of need for them to be, or I do look at them as positions of needs, but I don't look at them as positions of value to be touched in the first two rounds.
And you hit it on the head on that. Do you think fans would be upset if they got another edge rusher? I know it's a common theme of the 49ers throughout the draft or recent years getting defensive linemen. And I think if they do draft the edge rusher, people are probably going to be upset with that. They need to address. I don't know why the team's so keen on picking up D Ford's contract if he can't go. And it's hard because,
Well,
like
we
you
don't
said,
know,
he's one.
right?
Well, yeah, that's the
And
issue.
I
It's like
think the thing with D Ford is that he's such a good player that if he is healthy somehow, you got to be able to get something out of him because he's that good.
you can't replace
That's
that.
what people, right? That's what people don't understand when it comes to D Ford. Yeah, there's. I'm also upset with how little snaps he's played. I'm also frustrated that the poor guy keeps getting hurt. I'm frustrated that they gave a second round pick for a guy who's been hurt perpetually since college. Like this back problem was existent for D Ford at Auburn. But guess what? D Ford is also a fantastic football player. He's awesome. He's as good as any football player on the 49ers. He really changes what they do and he dominates games. And for that reason, they can't just afford to just let him walk for nothing.
What I want for the 49ers to do in the draft, I want them to address the defensive line. I want them to get a mobile, young, athletic quarterback, but in the later rounds. like a Kellen Mond or someone maybe they could pick up in the third, fourth, or fifth round. Someone later that has some potential, but not something that's going to be like a huge price tag on them. I'd rather them get Matthew Stafford, to be honest, than try to go through the draft. But also, I would like for them to address in the draft, if they're able to, special teams. Our special teams are horrible. Our our we had River, what's his name, River Craycraft, returning punts. Our kickoff return never seemed to get past the 20-yard line, even when the ball got kicked to the 5-yard line. Like, it was horrible. And I want them to get that explosive type of player. And I wouldn't even mind them in the early rounds to even draft another receiver. If they could get another dynamic receiver to go along with what they have, because I feel like you put a lot of emphasis on the offense, and a lot of our playmakers get injured all the time, and it's just because of the style they play. Debo Samuel, um, what if Kendrick Bourne, we don't re-sign him, and then we have all these players that are on the cusp? Like, what if Jalen Hurd doesn't come back? What do we do then going
Well,
forward?
this regime has already invested 12 draft picks in the last 3 years on wide receiver play. They can't afford to invest anymore. At some point, they have drafted Trent Taylor. They traded up 2 picks to get Dante Pettis. They drafted Richie James. They drafted Debo. They drafted Brandon Ayuk. They traded 2 picks for Emmanuel Sanders. They drafted Juwan Jennings, and they traded 3 picks for Brandon Ayuk. And that's to go with the fact that they also gave Pierre Garcon a big contract in 2017 free agency and gave Marquise Goodwin a hefty extension. They got Travis Benjamin coming back. He should help in both those areas. And in regards to the special teams, I think it's just about them staying healthy. What happens to the special teams is that usually your backup players play special teams. What happened to the 49ers is that their backup players were playing offense and defense, which means that random guys they would sign and they would pull up from the practice squad had to jump into the special teams and just play. So that lack of synchronization hurt them. And then not to mention a lot of backup players were doubling up where they were playing defense and they were playing special teams, or they were playing offense and they were playing special teams, which is a lot to ask.
Yeah.
I think if they could get their key players staying healthy, then your backup players can continue to play special teams and they should be okay in that department.
Another thing is, as I hope the Niners move on for some of the players that they messed up on the draft. I hope they move on from Trent Taylor. I hope they move on from some of the other players that are just haven't produced to the level that just even competent level in the NFL. And it's not to say that they're not good players. You have to be a good player to make it to the NFL. It's just for whatever reason any team they just miss on some draft picks, and I feel like the Niners have missed on, and it's hurt them. It hurt them in the cap, and it's you could tell when our depth is not there. We have a core group of players, but when they're out, it really shows. We don't have that group to get over the hump, and I would hope we could bring in some new talent to see if this is something that they could create some type of change to go forward, because it's a long road. And not only do we have a lot of free agents this year, contracts are going to start coming up again, and then our cap situation is just not good. And I don't know what you could do to combat that going forward. You got to be as creative as you can. Um, you lean heavily on the coaching of Kyle Shanahan, but I mean, the defense, we might lose our coordinator, so that's going to be a whole nother situation itself. Do you taking a stride back since they're going to lose the coordinator?
To an extent, I think that if they can bring in a Raheem Morris, as long as Kyle Shanahan's the head coach, I think the defense will be okay. I think they might look just a step back, just getting a different voice in there. But I don't think Robert Saleh is just going to go to the first place he goes to and immediately have 100% success. He's also going to probably take a step back just because of communication, and he had a way of doing things that he has to reset. But I think for the most part, the defense should be okay. Getting Nick Bosa, player like Fred Warner, all those things should make them okay. Jimmy Ward is really special. So I think that there shouldn't be much of a drop off. This should be an offensive driven football team next year. Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, George Kittle is as good a trio of weapons as there is in the NFL. You sprinkle in Kyle Shanahan's genius, and then you throw in a little bit of Mostert, a little bit of Jeff Wilson in the run game, and all of that. I mean, as long as the quarterback play is competent, this should be as explosive as an offense as there is in the NFL.
I did see that in an earlier series that you did with Grant Cohn, you mentioned about getting a top tier running back in the early rounds. You have them under that rookie contract because if once they hit
Okay.
that second contract, they never, they never live up to it.
Yeah. Okay. So in theory, I am good with that. The current 49ers don't need that. But in theory, yes, I'm 100% for that. There's a gigantic difference between Dalvin Cook and Raheem Mostert. I know everybody loves Raheem Mostert's story, and he does certain things really well. He's really fast, good vision. He runs so hard. He competes. He's so easy to root for. He's a really good player. But Dalvin Cook is way more special. Dalvin Cook makes so much out of nothing in a run game. And I think if you can get 5 years of Dalvin Cook in a first round pick, I think that's a Super Bowl window. And maybe you don't give him the second contract or a player like that. Like if the Cowboys never gave Zeke Elliott a second contract, 5 years from Zeke Elliott would have been superior production for a number 4 overall pick. Todd Gurley at 10, if they never gave him the second contract, those 5 years you would have gotten amazing production for a number 10 overall pick. Like running backs hit the ground running from day one. They're special from day one. And if you get one of those special guys and you're able to use them and run the football with them and stuff, you have a really good opportunity to be a great team because they can impact the run game and the pass game and protect your quarterback. So from that standpoint, yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, like if the 49ers didn't have other more pressing needs, I would say I'm 100% in on getting a running back. Just don't give him the second contract because that special running back could take this offense and just dominate. Like if the Niners had Dalvin Cook this year and he played 16 games, even with Mullins and CJ, I'm confident they could have won 9 games because the run game would have been that good.
Yeah, I believe that. Going into next season, what are your predictions or what do you see the 49ers doing? Do you see them competing for the division? Do you see them as a playoff team? I understand that there's a lot of moving pieces right now. We won't really know until free agency settles in the draft. But how do you feel going into next year
Yeah,
or going into next
I
season?
fully expect them to be a playoff team. They have a top-notch coach, and when you have a top-notch coach, you always have a chance. And then you go with the fact that they do have a stacked roster. When you have a George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Trent Williams, 4 guys who are amongst the top 25, 30 players in the NFL, and then you got a really good chance at being a playoff team. There's a lot of pieces that need to fall. This division is still going to be hard. I think the Rams are still going to be an 8-8 to 10-6 type team. I think Arizona is going to be in that range too, just because Kyler Murray is so dynamic. And then Seattle is always good. They're Seattle. They got a good coach, good quarterback. So the division is going to be tough. But absolutely, I feel the Niners roster is still stacked. They still have Kyle Shanahan, who's amongst the best. It's just about where do the pieces fall with quarterback and how they fill up roster holes and stuff. Because I think that for the immediate future, they're going to be okay next year. But I think the bigger questions, all the decisions that they make this year are going to come back, and it's going to really set the tone for how 2022, 23, 24 all go. Oh, I'm good. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
No, I appreciate you coming on the show. Like I said earlier, it was a pleasure to have you. Um, as a casual, football fan that just loves the 49ers, seeing your insight and hearing you and seeing what you got to say about certain things, it just makes a lot more sense and makes me a better fan as well. It makes me just enjoy
Oh, I
games.
really appreciate that, man. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
It takes it from run a successful team and to understand why a team is not doing well at the time or why they are doing well. When they're doing well, a lot of people don't question it. But when they're doing bad, everyone wants to know why. What's going wrong? Well, how come this is not working out? This person needs to go. They need to get rid of Jimmy, this and that. You know how it goes. But know about the game, the intricate details, it makes it much more better. If they do
For
sign,
sure, for sure.
do resign Jimmy, I'm I should have put on my Garoppolo jersey. If they get rid of him, I'm gonna need you to sign it and send it to Grant. He's the biggest Garoppolo fan out there.
For sure, I'll send it. For sure, let's do that. That'd be really funny.
Okay, if he doesn't get re-signed, I'll send it out to you and give it to him. I know he needs it.
All right,
Man,
awesome.
I appreciate you. Let me wrap it up right here. Thanks again for listening to Escape from San Francisco podcast with my guest today, Vish Kumaran. You can follow him on Twitter under @Vish Kumaran. If you want some 49er insight, just football in general. I understand you do basketball as well. He's really good. He has a YouTube channel called Blake and Vish. He's also on Mondays with Grant Cohen. Uh, Go out there, give him some support, and get your football and basketball knowledge up. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. You're awesome, Aaron. I really loved being on here with you. Let's do this again sometime.
I appreciate you, man.